Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. In today's episode, the Phils have made their first cuts of spring training, and a name that you're familiar with has been moved to minor league camp. So we'll talk about the three players that were reassigned. We'll also talk about a very interesting scheduling decision by Major League Baseball, one that conflicts with a big night of the season for the Philadelphia Phillies. And Phillies fans are none too happy about that. And also, we've got 16 days till opening day. Who's the best Philly to ever wear number 16? I got a couple options I'm still choosing between. We'll get into all of that on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, it is another episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for joining us here. I'm Connor Thomas, your host, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming us in podcasting form. And if you're watching on YouTube and haven't subscribed yet, that's the best way to help us out here on Locked On Phillies is to subscribe to the YouTube channel. So appreciate everyone who's done that and who's going to. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. It's a great deal. Go ahead and check out Prize Picks. Now, it is not a great deal for a couple of guys that were in the Philadelphia Phillies spring training camp. The Phillies have made their first moves of the spring when it comes to cutting down the amount of guys they have in Major League camp. There are only 14 games remaining and 16 days remaining until opening day. So you're going to start to see guys filter off a little bit as far as minor leaguers who are getting some look, guys who are not going to make the roster, stuff like that. It's perfectly natural to see these guys around this time of the spring start to fall out of Major League camp. So there's a couple things that can happen. Players can be reassigned to minor league camp if they are minor leaguers, if they're not on the 40-man roster, but they were non-roster invites to Major League camp. That's just simple. They just move them to minor league camp. They reassign them, all good and well. And then if you're on the 40-man roster, you have to be optioned to AAA or a lower league. You could be optioned further down, but normally it's just one jump at a time. So option to AAA in order for you to be moved out of Major League camp, because naturally, if you're on the 40-man roster, you get automatic invites to spring training. So you had two of the former minor league players that were just reassigned to minor league camp and one guy that was optioned. So who are they? Well, Tyler Phillips was one of the first ones. Tyler Phillips, another pitcher on the team. They're all pitchers. Michael Mercado was the guy who had to be optioned because he was on the 40-man roster. So he had to be, still is, has to be optioned down to AAA. So he's still on the 40-man, but he is not going to be part of the opening day roster for the team unless crazy injuries happen and he gets optioned back up. And the reason those guys kind of got sent down, it seems the theme of what the Philadelphia Phillies are doing right now, it's not so much stuff. It's commands and control and all of that stuff. Mercado has good stuff, Michael Mercado. Major league caliber stuff. He just hasn't been as consistently around the strike zone as you'd like him to be. Commanding his pitches has not been a strong suit. The same thing for Tyler Phillips, who's a minor league guy who will probably be a potential starter for what you're looking at in AAA for the Philadelphia Phillies this year. You'd probably see Tyler Phillips maybe in the rotation, depending on how many guys they have down there in AAA that you're looking at, like Spencer Turnbull, Colby Allard, those guys you brought in that people are asking me, oh, will they make the Major League roster? They could make up a good part of the starting rotation in AAA this year. So not sure where guys like Tyler Phillips slot in yet, but they're guys to keep an eye on for AAA for rotation depth or bullpen assets. But the name that everybody's buzzing about, Griff McGary, was one of the three players that was moved out of Major League camp, that was cut from chances to make the opening day roster. Now, there were no expectations that Griff McGary was going to make the Major League roster, right? The Phillies are set in the rotation. He's been a starter since he was drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies. You have not looked at him as any other way than a starting prospect who is not quite ready or does not have quite a path to the major leagues. So that kind of makes sense. But the fact that he's one of the first 3 guys cut has you questioning a little bit of something like, I don't want to see a little bit more from Griff McGary. And it's always been this 3-headed monster for the Philadelphia Phillies over the past couple of years in their minor league pitcher development. It's been Andrew Painter as the most prominent head of the 3-headed monster. That's been Mick Abel and Griff McGary kind of in supporting roles. But those are the 3 names you've heard for 3 like high-level starting prospects that are down in the minors. Andrew Painter obviously hurt. Mick Abel has looked really good this spring. He won't make the opening day roster, but he's looked really good. And then Griff McGary has kind of fallen into that 3rd spot. And he's getting moved to minor league camp, or he has been moved to minor league camp. So the Phillies are saying, okay, buddy, you need more work. But there's more to it than that. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The expectation is that Griff McGary is going to end up in the bullpen in AAA. So what does that mean for the Philadelphia Phillies? Well, it means a couple things. And also, what does it mean for a guy like Griff McGary, who's probably, his head's probably spinning right now as he tries to find his path to the major leagues and to making good on his high draft capital. What it means, let's start with what it means for the Philadelphia Phillies, and then we'll get to what it means for Griff McGary. For the Philadelphia Phillies, what it means is, first off, their bullpen options and their starting options for the major league roster are stacked. I know when we go through the opening day roster predictions, I'm having trouble with a couple of bullpen spots. It's not for lack of options. There are a lot of great options there, and that's credit to Dave Dombrowski for going ahead and getting depth pieces to have when you're deciding who makes the major league roster. So that's good. The starting rotation is set. That's also good. And more on what this means for the Phillies, moving Griff McGary to the bullpen means that they feel comfortable about the starters they have at AAA already. So when you look at guys like Colby Allen, maybe Tyler Phillips, Nick Nelson could possibly be a starter down there, Spencer Turnbull, David Buchanan if he doesn't make the major league roster. These guys could all be starting at AAA, and a lot of them have major league experience. Griff McGary does not. So I think this is more a credit to the Phillies building up their depth as far as starting pitchers for emergency situations than it is a complete knock on Griff McGary. I think this is kind of a good sign for the Phillies organization, but you could have just said, hey, Griff McGary, AA, we're going to continue to start you because we view you as a starter. And some of these guys, we just have them in AAA because they're going to be quicker, ready for major league action, or they've been there before. So my question now is, what does this mean for Griff McGary as a prospect? Does it mean he's no longer a starting pitching prospect? And Rob Thompson talked about this, and he said that this role can change. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bullpen guy forever. No, it certainly doesn't mean that. And it doesn't mean that you're looking at a guy that is majorly failing expectations. I think this is more a product of what's going on around Griff McGary than what's going on with Griff McGary. So what does it mean for the individual player? Well, what it means for him is he's going to get an opportunity to pitch at AAA this year, it seems like. And even if it's out of the bullpen, sometimes that's a faster way to the majors. Here's the way I'd look at this if I was Griff McGary and I wanted to put a positive spin on it. I would look at Orion Kerkering from last year. Guy went from single A to pitching in the NLCS. That's an insane jump over the course of a year, and he was a much less known prospect than Griff McGary. Sometimes the bullpen is a quicker path to the majors. There are more bullpen pitchers than there are starters, and you're required to do less from an inning standpoint to go ahead and do that. So maybe what you see, and remember Christopher Sanchez's path to the major leagues as well. He came up as kind of a bullpen swing guy. He was back and forth between the bullpen and the rotation, depending on injuries and stuff like that. Eventually, he showed last year that he was capable as a starter. And what happened? He ended up in a starting role, and now he has the 5th spot in the rotation. So maybe could you see Griff McGary in the bullpen at the major league level this year? Again, I'd be surprised considering the depth they have. But the positivity for him is the bullpen path might be the quickest path to the majors for a player like Griff McGary. So we'll see. It's not ideal, I'm sure, for the kid, but those are the first 3 cuts of spring training. Griff McGary and Tyler Phillips being reassigned to minor league camp, and Michael Mercado being optioned to AAA, being that he was on the 40-man roster. So that's a little bit of news out of spring training, and we'll keep you updated as more guys leave the Phillies major league spring training ahead of opening day and before they come back north. So just a little bit of news for you, nothing to be overly worried about, and I hope I quelled some concerns that you might have had about Griff McGary being one of the guys out of spring training. Coming up next, we're going to discuss a very interesting scheduling decision that strongly affects Philadelphia Phillies fans, and Major League Baseball is having a bit of a problem right now with something. I'm going to highlight what it is with how they present the game on TV broadcast and why Phillies fans are upset in case you haven't seen it. So we'll talk about that coming up as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. All right, let me tell you about Prize Picks. They're awesome. They're the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. You got to check them out. It's just you against the numbers. You're not playing against any other players or any professional gamblers. No, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. Football season's over, but the action on the floor is heating up. It's tournament season, or you might be watching the fight for playoff home court with the pros. There's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. You can get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. Tonight, Sixers, Knicks. Oh, you've got yourself a major matchup in the East. Tyrese Maxey's back playing. He's had a couple days off because of a concussion. I think he's going to come back firing. I take his over in points. And the last time these teams played, Sunday, it was the lowest scoring NBA game in like 7 years. I'd look at the over for Jalen Brunson's points as well. That's what I would do. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. I just gave you 2 good ones already. You just need 2 more, and you can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. So go ahead and check them out and do this. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB, and you'll get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, you download the app, use code LOCKEDONMLB, you get a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is the best. You pick more or you pick less. It's that easy. So we have a bit of an issue with Major League Baseball's scheduling, and this has to do with the TV broadcast and everything. And I don't really know who to fault for this. It's just more of like a clunky kind of way of going about it. So the Apple TV Plus streaming service has announced that they're going to have a certain number of games again this year for major league teams. They did last year. It's kind of annoying because not everyone has it. It is what it is. That's just the nature of streaming in today's sports world. But one of the games that the Phillies are playing in that will be on Apple TV Plus will be Cole Hamels' retirement night. And normally what that would mean, Cole Hamels' retirement night, is that you have a bunch of features on NBC Sports Philadelphia, which is the network that holds the broadcasting rights to the Phillies on TV. Well, because Apple TV Plus is getting exclusive rights over these games, there's no NBC Sports Philadelphia coverage of the game. So does that mean that Cole Hamels' retirement night just kind of goes by the wayside? Like, I find it very hard to believe that a bunch of folks from Apple TV Plus, and that's nothing against Apple TV Plus, they're just a national service. They're not Phillies centric. Like, they're not here for a Phillies game. They're here for a baseball game. And I don't know what their plan is as far as how to cover that or what you're looking at for Cole Hamels' retirement festivities. But again, like normally you'd see a bunch of tributes to Cole Hamels on the broadcast. You're probably not going to see that with the game being on Apple TV Plus. And it sucks. Phillies fans are upset about it because Cole Hamels is a very special figure in this city. Of course, World Series MVP back in 2008, a huge reason why this team has the only ring they've ever won in my lifetime, and only, the second one they've ever won in franchise history. So he's a major, major figure in this franchise. They're having a retirement ceremony for him, and we might not be able to see many of the festivities or any potentially, depending on Apple TV Plus's coverage. Like, here's where my beef comes in. It's not that Apple TV Plus games are a thing. You have NFL games on Peacock. All these streaming services are going to start fighting for their piece of the pie when it comes to covering sports. And they're totally entitled to do that. And if you don't have streaming services at this point, you're a billion years behind on the time. That's on you. My issue, though, is that you've got to kind of work with the scheduling and avoid these nights that would be very special to players or to people watching the game or to broadcast crews that are very like hometown centric. Retirement nights, major like big time events centered around games and stuff like that. You should avoid doing that until you have a way to take these streaming services to a more local type of feel. Like, I like the Apple TV Plus broadcasts. I do. I enjoyed the statistics that they were sharing last year and stuff like that. Like, I don't mind the actual presentation, but it felt national. It felt like Sunday Night Baseball. And while there's a place for that, you're not going to have Cole Hamels' retirement night on Sunday Night Baseball because you know all the national guys are going to be looking at this from a national perspective and it's supposed to feel more local. So I understand why Philadelphia Phillies fans are upset about this. I kind of am as well. I hope there's a way that NBC Sports Philly finds a way to maybe do features surrounding the game that doesn't actually break the contract where Apple TV Plus has the exclusive broadcasting rights to it. Doesn't mean you can't cover stuff around the game, right? So maybe there's a way they can do that, but it's just kind of annoying how that works. It also builds up a bigger conversation. This is more baseball adjacent, but it has to do a lot with the Phillies. Luckily, they weren't one of the ones affected by like the network changes, but a lot of stuff has been changing as far as the TV network with like Bally's and stuff like that. We're here in Philadelphia. We have NBC Sports Philly, and that hasn't changed at least recently or really since I've been working in the industry or been an adult. Seems relatively stable right now. But a lot of stuff's changing in the world of how you consume games, and more you see games that are just streaming centric. You can only find them on a certain service. You got to get all these different services to do it. I'm not a person who complains about that because I think that's just part of consuming sports in the year 2024. But I do think that there's going to be further issues like this, where there's a disconnect between the streaming services and the people who normally hold the rights when it comes to games and events that would be special for the hometown broadcast to cover. This is one of those. And I also think that there's got to be a way that the Phillies can go, or NBC Sports Philly can go to Apple TV Plus and say, hey guys, I know this is on your schedule. We have a really special event this night that we had a lot of plans to cover and do great things for. Can we alternate the games? Can we switch them and you can have a different game and we'll give you the rights to that one? But I don't know how that all plays out contract-wise. So Phillies fans are a little bit upset about that. It's totally understandable that they are. I get that, and I don't know what the solution is. I imagine there must be something, but even if there's not, it's just a little bit of an annoyance with the upcoming season as it stands right now. So keep you updated if anything changes. But again, the issue, the Phillies will play on Apple TV Plus exclusively on the night of Cole Hamels' retirement celebration, which means you're not going to get the local coverage that you normally would, which, again, it's just annoying. That's all it is. But as long as the Phillies are winning, I think we'll be all right by that point. That's what matters to us really as fans. And coming up, we're going to talk about a guy who helped the Phillies win a lot, a really strong WAR, and the best Philly to ever wear number 16. Still kind of conflicted. We'll run through a couple of options, but I think I have my pick coming up as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. Speaking of streaming services, and this is why I love streaming services, and they're becoming more and more innovative. And Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV. And it provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Could be opening weekend for baseball, the college basketball tournament, whatever it is, you're going to want a Fire TV to watch all the action. And Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos for your favorite sports brands, like us here on Locked On. So you want to watch Locked On Phillies on your Fire TV? You can do that. You can also dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports with March Madness, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking, anything you want. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. And if you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you absolutely should. Come on. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfire TV. We're down to 16 days till opening day. Can you believe that? So who is the best Philadelphia Philly to wear number 16 in the history of the franchise? Believe it or not, 16 is kind of a dry number for the Philadelphia Phillies. I say that to say there aren't really many standout names on this list that you'd say, oh, easily that guy, the best number 16 in Philadelphia Phillies history. Now, actually, the current Philly who wears this jersey is probably going to have a look at this one day if he continues to progress. Brandon Marsh has worn this jersey for the past 2 years, the number 16 jersey. There's a chance that one day he could be the greatest Philly to ever put on the number 16 jersey. We'll see. Mickey Moniak had a chance. I mean, we know how good he was as a prospect, but never really panned out here. Cesar Hernandez wore it from 2013 to 2019. He's definitely in the conversation, I suppose. Another guy, if you go back a little bit further, he was on the 2008 team, wore number 16 for them. J.C. Romero, you remember him out of the pen. He was a huge part of that bullpen. But I'm going to go back a little bit farther for my pick. The guy that I'm going to pick, you're going to recognize the name. You might not recognize the player if you're a little bit younger. But Jim Morrison is going to be who I pick. He wore the number in 1978. He wore number 16. And he is a guy that he never made an all-star team, never won a World Series, but he's got a 12 career WAR even. He had over 100 home runs. He had 876 hits. I mean, he was just a guy who was a solid third baseman or second base, like that left side of the infield or middle infield type of guy for the Philadelphia Phillies and for multiple franchises back in the day. Played for the Pirates as well. He was a solid, consistent infielder, had solid production offensively here and there. He's just a really consistent player, and he's not really up against the who's who of Philadelphia Phillies greats. I mean, a case could be made for J.C. Romero. A case could be made for Brandon Marsh maybe being that guy someday, but I also want to give a little bit of love to the back in the day guys. So Jim Morrison, he's got, I believe, the highest number of WAR of anybody on this list who wore number 16 for the Phillies. So we're going to go with Jim Morrison. Shout out to Doors, not the same guy. But I think he's a quality player or was a quality player, and want to give some love to the guys who played back in the 70s. So that's my pick for best Philly number 16 in the history of the franchise. Tomorrow, we'll do number 15. We're getting closer, and as we get closer, these numbers are supposed to be heating up. 16 was just kind of a bit of a dead spot, but we'll see who we have on the countdown for tomorrow. And we're going to draw closer to opening day, so we'll keep you updated on everything you need to know about the Phillies before they take on the Braves on March 28th for the first game of the regular season. But that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for checking us out. Please make sure, again, you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I will talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.